All right, everyone. So the state of Washington recently declared that if someone goes into a confessional and confesses to the priest that he has molested a child, the priest is mandated to go to law enforcement. The Roman Catholic Church is up in arms over this. They have been expressing outrage against this law, and the Roman Catholic Church declared that if a priest obeys this law, that priest will be excommunicated. So you will be excommunicated for reporting a pedophile to law enforcement because the pedophile confessed his crime in the confessional. Now, amazingly, you have Roman Catholics who are expressing their outrage against this law. This is the problem with the Vatican right here. The Vatican is just like the religious establishment in the time of Christ, worshiping the letter of the law, but rejecting the spirit of the law. This is what Christ told the religious leaders in his time. He said, you guys worship the letter of the law, but you reject the spirit of the law, justice and mercy. Justice and mercy. How in the hell is it justice to cover up for a pedophile? I mean, this is it's so blatantly, obviously evil. This whole decree of defending a pedophile as long as the pedophile has made his admission in the confessional, it is so blatantly evil. It goes without saying. I don't even know why I have to say this. And you have Catholics who will sit there and say, well, because you can't break the seal of confession, and it doesn't matter if the pedophile has admitted to molesting a child in the confessional, the seal of confession can never be broken. How is this justice? And how is this mercy to the victim of the molester, of the abuser? It is utterly antithetical to justice and mercy, and therefore it is utterly antithetical to the spirit of the law. The Roman Catholic Church has become like the Jewish temple in the time of Christ, rejecting the spirit of the law and worshiping the letter of the law. So they have the letter of the law, which is what? You cannot break the seal of confession. Okay, what if someone has molested a child and they admit to this crime in the confessional? And they'll say, and I've heard Catholics tell me this, they'll say, well, if Catholic priests start going to law enforcement, then the pedophiles are not going to go to confession. Are you meaning to tell me that that someone who does not want to go to justice, someone who does not want justice imposed on them for the crimes that they have committed, is truly penitent? Are you actually going to make this argument? If someone is truly repentant, if someone is truly a penitent and is truly sorry for their sins, they are going to want to go through justice. And if someone has committed an atrocious crime, and they are truly sorry, then they are going to want to have the law imposed on them. So if someone doesn't want to confess this horrendous crime in the confessional because they're afraid that they're going to go to prison, guess what? They're not sorry. And if you want to argue to the contrary, then how do you explain the unrepentant thief versus the penitent thief? You have the penitent thief. So Christ is crucified, he's on the cross, and he is in between two thieves. And one thief is scoffing at Christ and saying, well, if you are truly who you say you are, Jesus, then get us off these crosses. Get me off the cross. What was the unrepentant thief saying? What he was saying is, I am not repentant. I am not sorry. I have no remorse for the crimes that I have done. The penitent thief, on the other hand, says to the unrepentant thief, what are you talking about? We deserve what we are getting, while this man is utterly innocent. Does Christ look to the unrepentant thief and say, you will be with me in paradise? No, he looks to the thief who knows that he deserved what he was getting, and he says, you will be with me in paradise, because that thief was truly sorry. And that thief embraced the punishment because he knew that he deserved that punishment. So to sit there and say, well, they're not going to go to confession if they know that the priest is going to turn them in, well then, is that person really sorry? Obviously not. And what the Catholic Church should really do, and they're never going to do this, but what they should really do is say, okay, if someone confesses an atrocious crime in the confessional, murder, rape, molestation, you guys know the list. The law should be, the canon law should be that the priest will tell the confessor, now that you have confessed this crime, you have to go to law enforcement. I am going to report you. We have to go to law enforcement, or else you get no forgiveness. Does not Jesus tell the disciples, whosoever sins you forgive, they shall be forgiven, and whosoever sins you shall not forgive, they shall not be forgiven? This is what Jesus tells the disciples. So the authority to forgive sins is given to the disciples and to their successors. This is why the priests in the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church have confession, because of that verse in the New Testament, because that authority was passed down to the disciples and their successors, and the priests, through apostolic succession, have that authority. So because they have the authority to not forgive sins, instead of saying, okay, you'll be forgiven if you say however many Hail Marys, etc., the priest should say, okay, you're not going to be forgiven until the law is imposed, because you deserve to have the law imposed on you for the crimes you have done. Does not St. Paul say in his letter to the Romans that it is the job of the government to hold the sword and to unleash vengeance? Wait. In the same letter to the Romans, St. Paul says that vengeance belongs to the Lord. But also in the same letter, St. Paul says that the job of the state is to unleash vengeance. Well, I thought vengeance belonged to God. How does it belong to the state? Because the state's job is to unleash the vengeance of God. Vengeance does belong to God, but the enactor of God's vengeance can also be the state. The state has this authority given to it by God to enact the vengeance of God. We're not Manichaeans, we're not Albigensians, we don't have this belief of utterly severing the spiritual from the physical. The spiritual and the physical work together in harmony to a great extent. Many times they don't, but they're supposed to work in harmony. And the state, being an enactor of justice, is to impose justice, and justice is a part of what? The spirit of the law, justice and mercy. And so because that is the state's job, the church should work with the state to impose justice on evildoers. Now, what does St. Paul say in his letter to the Ephesians? He says, and he says this in chapter 5, verse 11, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. He doesn't say, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, and don't expose them if they are confessed to you in the confessional. That's not what Paul says. He says, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. Well, how are you exposing them, exposing these evildoers, if you're not reporting them to law enforcement? And pedophilia is a work of darkness. Child sexual abuse is a work of darkness. So why aren't you exposing them? Even, and regardless if this crime is confessed in the confessional, you should be exposing them, because it is a work of darkness and it is an atrocious crime. But this is not really surprising at all, because I've seen this myself in the ways that the Vatican conducts itself. I'll say this story, I've said this story many times, but back in 2013, I met a priest by the name of Robert L. Kinsel. Robert L. Kinsel was a heretic of Sodom who was actually teaching people that members of Sodom can do the practices of Sodom, and as long as they are doing these practices under the realm of monogamy, in a monogamous relationship, they're actually not committing a mortal sin. And this is what father, Robert L. Kinsel, was teaching, he was also a sexual predator, and he was actually covering up for a convicted pedophile who was also a priest by the name of Robert Hrdlicka. Robert Hrdlicka was a convicted pedophile who served time in prison for his crimes. Before he was put behind bars, Robert L. Kinsel, his fellow priest, begged law enforcement not to put this guy behind bars and told law enforcement to please allow the church to send Robert Hrdlicka, this pedophile, to a Catholic rehab center. Of course, they didn't listen, and Robert Hrdlicka did go to prison, but the fact was that Kinsel was trying to cover up for a pedophile. Now, I exposed the heresy, the sodomite heresy of Kinsel, to the Diocese of Austin, and the Diocese of Austin had a meeting with me, and we spoke for about 2.5 hours, and I kid you not, there were two men who met with me. There was Deacon Ron Walker, and there was another guy, I want to say his name was Danny Garcia. And Ron Walker looked at me, and he said, "So what do you want us to do?" And I'm thinking, okay, I'm a member of the flock. I'm a member of the sheepfold of the church. You are one of the shepherds. And you, Mr. Garcia, you're a priest and you're an official for the Austin Diocese. You're both officials for the Austin Diocese. And you're asking a member of the flock, the sheepfold, who are the prey of the wolves, what do you want to do? What do you want us to do about this? You guys should know what to do about this, but you're asking me. And I said, well, excommunicate him. He's teaching heresy that is extremely demonic and destructive. Excommunicate him. And Deacon Ron Walker rolled his eyes at me and said, we can't do that. Excommunication is only done if the action of the person causes great scandal. Teaching sodomite heresy is not great scandal, according to the Roman Catholic Church. So, but, if you're a priest and you hear someone in the confessional telling you that he has sexually abused a child and you report this person to law enforcement, guess what? You get excommunicated. And what happened to Mr. Vigano? Mr. Vigano was saying, listen, the papacy of Francis is not really legitimate, and it was not legitimate. And what happened to Mr. Vigano? Mr. Vigano got excommunicated. So you get excommunicated for reporting pedophiles to law enforcement, and you get excommunicated for saying that Francis's papacy was not legitimate because Francis was covering up for Theodore McCarrick, who was covering up for pedophiles. But the pedophiles don't get excommunicated. Theodore McCarrick doesn't get excommunicated. These people, oh yeah, I'll give you guys another story. Christopher Phillips, Father Christopher Phillips, he was a big-time priest in Texas, and he was covering up for a pedophile by the name of Deacon Orr. Deacon Orr was, well, he was a deacon, as the title explains, and he was a deacon in this church in Texas. I went to this church for several months. I saw Deacon Orr participating in the Mass, reading the scriptures. I saw Father Christopher Phillips leading Mass. I went to many a Mass that was directed by Father Christopher Phillips. I spoke with Father Christopher Phillips several times. I mean, these people were the leaders of a church that I was attending. And it turned out that Deacon Orr, this person who I was seeing reading the Bible and all these masses, was a pedophile. Well, it turned out that Father Christopher Phillips was covering up for this pedophile for decades, and they were parents at the Catholic school that was right next to the church where Deacon Orr was working at as a teacher, telling Christopher Phillips that Deacon Orr was a problem, and he was such a problem to the point that the young male students at this Catholic school were actually avoiding any class that Deacon Orr was teaching, and Father Christopher Phillips didn't give a damn. Did Father Christopher Phillips get excommunicated? Was he ever excommunicado? Was there an excommunicado declared against Mr. Phillips? Nope. No, he's not excommunicated, because according to the Roman Catholic Church, you only get excommunicated if you have done great scandal. Oh, and that great scandal is actually going to law enforcement to report the crime of child sexual abuse, which you heard admitted to you in the confessional. That's the great scandal that you get excommunicated for. Not sexually preying on young men, not sexually abusing children, not covering up for abuse. No. That's not the scandal. Do you guys understand why I say the Vatican is evil? Do you guys get it? Has it penetrated your guys' heads yet? Does it compute in your heads at all? Because I keep hearing you Roman Catholics trying to argue with me. And here is my question to you guys, you Roman Catholics who are upset with me about this whole thing. Here's my question to you guys. Let's say you have a child. Okay, you're a Catholic, you go to Mass, you're a devout Catholic, and you mean well. And your child gets inappropriately touched by a priest. And that priest confesses in the confessional to another priest that he has molested your child. Would you want the priest who heard the confession from the person who abused your child to go to law enforcement? Because you're going to sit there and say, well, the priest can't do that because he would be breaking the seal of confession. If the priest molested your child and confessed that crime to another priest in the confessional, would you want the priest who heard that confession to go to law enforcement to report your child's abuser? I just want a yes or no answer. Break the seal of confession or cover up for the priest or the person who abused your child. Which one is it? Which path are you going to take here? How far do we want to go? And if you say, well, I would rather have the law, canon law honored, and for the priest not to go to law enforcement, if you choose that option, then you are no different than the religious establishment that nailed Christ on a cross. Because that religious establishment, as Christ said, worshiped the letter of the law, but rejected the spirit of the law, which is justice and mercy. And if you choose the option of the priest covering up for the abuser, you have neither justice nor mercy. Anyway, those are my thoughts on that. You guys just heard some theology. God bless.